How's everyone feeling tonight? All right. I'm really inspired. This is a dream come true for me. When I first came down here, I met Rip, and he's been a good friend. And but he never ever spoke about this. He never spoke about the past. And when I found out that he was a freedom rider, because I was up north, you know, us that have gone through that period of time, we all have our scars on our backs. And so when I heard that he was one of those guys, we were up north, we were saying, man, those guys are crazy, going down, riding on the bus. We would never do that. So to come down here and actually meet one of the guys who we were saying was crazy, you know, it just thrilled me to know. And then when I first came, he told me he played jazz, and he was on the coast and he was playing with organ trios and stuff, and that's a lot of stuff I do, you know, with McGriff and all them cats. And so when I found out he was a freedom rider, I said, wow, what a perfect thing to put together is to have him play jazz, because if he wasn't competent, then of course I wouldn't have done this. But it was very surprising to me that he was very competent. And as you can see and as you can hear, he can play, you know. And if he would have continued on college and get his music degree, no telling what he would have accomplished. But he sacrificed a lot for us, you know. So I'm just really happy that I could and that we could honor him, and it helps with the scars on my back too. So we're going to continue on.
The next thing you know, May 4th comes up, 1961 now. Jim Farmer decides to test the ICC ruling about the Greyhound and Trailway buses in the South. In the North, you could sit anywhere you wanted to. When you got off the bus, you could go in the front door, use any restroom you wanted to, and sit anywhere you wanted to at the lunch counter. But when you went into the Deep South, the signs were still there. You could not sit at the front of the bus if you were black. You could not go in the front door, and you could not eat at their lunch counter. So CORE, C-O-R-E, Congress of Racial Equality, decided to leave Washington, D.C. on May 4th, 1961. And I think it was May 17th that they had the bus burning in Anniston, Alabama. That was the Greyhound bus. People that were on, 6 riders were on the Greyhound bus, plus regular passengers. That bus was firebombed with passengers on it, but they managed to get off. The Trailway bus went on into Birmingham. Both of these buses started out at Atlanta at the same time. They departed Atlanta at the same time. It just so happened that the Greyhound bus went to Anniston, Alabama before going to Birmingham. In Birmingham, the hoodlums got on the bus. They were beating up everybody. One gentleman was hospitalized with I don't know how many stitches he had to have. And at this time, CORE decided to abandon the freedom rides. John Siegenthaler, my blood brother, we call each other blood brothers, John Siegenthaler Sr. was working for Bobby Kennedy, who was the Attorney General at that time, asked him to go to Birmingham and get these freedom riders out of Birmingham into New Orleans and back to Washington, D.C. He did that. But the Nashville group, we knew about the freedom rides even before they started. So we were monitoring the freedom rides. Late one night, when we heard that the freedom rides had been abandoned, We had a meeting at First Baptist Capitol Hill. We had a meeting early that morning because we would always meet at 6 o'clock in the morning for our first meeting. Then we had a second meeting at 6 that night that lasted until 1 a.m. We were trying to get monies from the Nashville Christian Leadership Council to send 11 riders to continue the Freedom Rides. They gave us a check, and that check needed 2 signatures. It only had 1 signature on it. And I think what they thought was, well, we'll give them this check. They can't cash it, so maybe in a couple of days, they'll forget about it. There was a numbers man. I think they called him Big Jelly. Good Jelly. I know there was a jelly in there somewhere. Good Jelly. He was the number man in Nashville. We took that check to him, he cashed it, and he said, I'll get the signature, the second signature, when they come back in town. So we put 10 people on, actually it was 11 people were supposed to leave Nashville en route to Birmingham. One, Celine McCullen, missed the bus, a white female from Scarrett. She missed the bus in Nashville. So Kwame Leo Lillard drove her down to Pulaski, Tennessee, of all places. Here's a black man driving a white woman to Pulaski to catch the bus. Now, for those of you who don't know, when you heard the little noise, Pulaski is the home of the Ku Klux Klan. She got on the bus as an observer. Her role changed. She was now an observer. She was not a part of the Freedom Riders. Jim Zwerg and one black student, Paul Brooks, sat in the front seat behind the driver. When the bus reached the Birmingham state line, city line, they were arrested, taken off the bus. And then they checked everybody's tickets to see where they were going so that they would know if they were Freedom Riders or not. And the way that they knew that they were Freedom Riders, because the ticket was Nashville, Birmingham, Montgomery, Jackson, New Orleans. That's how your ticket was stamped. And so everyone that had that kind of a ticket, they were Freedom Riders. Jim Zwerg was thrown into the drunk tank in the Birmingham jail with a lot of white drunks, males. And the policeman, Bull Connor, told the drunks, said, this is one of those inn lovers, and have your way. He's one of the Freedom Riders, have your way. So Jim decided, well, what can I do? I'm in here with all these drunks, and they're gonna whoop me or beat me up, send me to the hospital, and the police is not gonna protect me. He taught him a song. The next thing that Gerald hears coming out, he hears this music. He opens the door and they're singing, "We Shall Overcome." The Freedom Riders were taken out of jail and brought back. Bull Connor said he was going to bring them back to Fisk University. Meanwhile, John Siegenthaler hears about this and he said, I know that they're going to kill him. They're not going to make it back to Fisk. They brought him back to Ardmore, which is on the state line of Tennessee and Alabama on 65 when you cross going south, and as soon as you cross the state line, the first sign you're going to see is Ardmore. And Ardmore is in Tennessee and Alabama. He put him out right there. A young lady by the name of Catherine Burke had been talking to Bull Connor all the way from Birmingham all the way to the state line, which the students didn't know that they were going to be put out. When she got out of the car, she asked him, she said, do you like cowboy movies? Because they talked about movies all the way up from Birmingham, and he said yes. She said, well, we're going to play cowboys, and we'll see you at high noon, because everything in the Western movies happened at high noon. We got word back here in Nashville that they had been taken out of jail, and they found a telephone, called us, again, Kwame Leo Lillard, borrowed a station wagon from one of the white students' mother, drove down 31 because there is no 65. There were no interstates during that time. Drove down 31 and crossed over to Ardmore and found them. Took them all the way back to Birmingham. Now, remember when I said during the sit-ins, when one group would be taken to jail, a second group would come in? Well, when this first group gets back to Birmingham, the second group is at the bus station waiting for them. So now we've gone from 11 to 23 riders. The Nashville riders, they finally got a bus out of Birmingham and went into Montgomery. And in Montgomery is where the Nashville group was beaten. Jim Swerg had about 3 or 4 ribs broken, almost lost an eye. John Lewis was beaten across the head. And the one person that we don't talk about too much is William Barbee, a Nashville student. It's a little graphic, but 2 hoodlums had him on the ground, and he was an observer. He was not on the bus. He was sent down before the bus even, he came from Nashville straight to Montgomery. And he was to be an observer so that he could call back and let us know what was going on and how many more students to send down. They saw him in the crowd, and they started beating on him. 2 guys started beating on him. They got him on the ground, and they found a lead pipe from somewhere. They put one foot on his head and one had a foot on his neck and tried to put that pipe through his ear. So he was hospitalized. 2 of our white female students were, they got away, they were beaten. John Siegenthaler was trying to get them into a car to get them to safety, but they didn't know who he was. So if you ever talk to John, ask him about the lead pipe. He was hit with a lead pipe and hospitalized for 5 days, knocked under a car, because someone asked him who he was. If he had just said, I'm here, and tried to get the girls in, maybe he wouldn't have been hit, but he says, I'm a representative of the Attorney General. See, sometimes it doesn't pay to identify yourself. So he ended up under a car with his head cracked open. Barbee stayed in the hospital 4 or 5 days, and then he came back home. Ray Arsenault is the author of the book Freedom Riders. They had on camera the 2 men that beat Barbee up. They came to Nashville to his home and said, we have all the evidence we need to charge and convict these men. And in the spirit of nonviolence, Barbee said, I cannot press charges against 2 men because they represent a nation that feels the way they do about integration. So he never pressed charges. To this day, we don't know if he died as a result of the beating that he took because he was hit by a bus, Jefferson Street bus, I believe. We don't know if he just stepped out in front of that bus or if it was an accident. But he was never the same after he left Montgomery, Alabama. I was in the 3rd group to go to Montgomery. I left Nashville in a car along with 4 other gentlemen, and we arrived in Montgomery on May 23rd. May 24th, I was on a bus from Montgomery to Jackson, Mississippi. Of course, we had the National Guard to take us from the Alabama National Guard took us to the state line of Mississippi. Then they changed over to the Mississippi Guard. We never stopped the bus to have a restroom break. And we were on 2-lane highways. So you have to think about the 2-lane highways, no interstates. And that is a long ride from Montgomery to Jackson. Of course, you can get there real fast now, but back in the day, 2-lane highway, and sometimes it was just places where traffic was really slow. We did not go through, I think that's Highway 82 or 80, I'm not sure. Thank you, 80. We did not go through Selma because there were about 3,000 people waiting for us in Selma. So the buses took went around Selma, Alabama. I was arrested on May 24th along with 25 to 30 other riders. We went to the city jail. We were booked, fingerprinted, and put in jail. Riders kept coming. The Tennessee State riders came in on the 4 days later on the 28th. Some of those that were in that first group that went to Birmingham. We filled the city jails. The third group came in. They moved us to the county jails. We filled the city and county jail. The county jail, I don't know if they had ever used it because everything that was stainless steel was green, including the floor, and it wasn't stainless steel. So we spent 2 days cleaning our cell block. The building was somewhat of a square with a courtyard in it. And as I mentioned earlier, we would sing all the time. And so during the day, we would sing. The men in our cell block would sing. And that was a signal to let the other riders know that we were okay. Then the ladies would sing. We'd know that they were okay. So there were 4 different singing groups because we were all segregated. And that was a sign to say, okay, everything is okay. We filled those jails in Mississippi, and then they took 27 of us, which was in the first group, to the county farm. And if you ever seen the movie Cool Hand Luke, that's what the county farm was like. The only good thing about the county farm was the food. They grew all of their fruits and vegetables and slaughtered their own pigs and cows and what have you, so the food was fresh. I enjoyed the county jail. A couple of days later, they took us back to the county jail. And what they were doing was making preparation to send us to Parchman State Penitentiary, maximum security. This was an agreement made with the governor of Mississippi and the Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy. This was for our safety. And it was also supposed to be a deterrent for other riders to know that you're going to end up in the worst penitentiary in the world. This was to frighten you off. But in total, we had over 450 freedom riders in Parchman. I only know of one that stayed the whole term. It was a $250 fine or 62 days in jail. And I only know of one person that stayed the 62. They refused to take the bail. But you had to take the bail within 39 days to get out. By this time, they had made a case so that we wouldn't have a record. I came back to Nashville. Oh, meanwhile, May 24th, I was arrested. June 1st, I was said I was no longer a student at TSU, along with 13 other students. We were expelled. November 1st, we won our case and we were readmitted into school, but we had lost those credits that we had. Just a couple of years ago, 2008, with the help of Jim Lawson, John Siegenthaler, and other ministers, and the president of TSU, we received an honorary doctorate of humane letter. So that's where the first doctor comes in. And it wasn't easy. Thank you. And it wasn't easy to get that particular degree because the Board of Regents said we can only give 2 a year, plus what you did didn't amount to anything. And so a good friend of mine, a longtime friend of mine, called me. It came out in the paper that the Board of Regents had refused to give us our honorary degree. A good friend of mine called me, and I said, be cool, because she was mad, super mad. Said things that you can't even say on TV nowadays. Because one of the persons that was on the Board of Regents, she went to school with them, elementary, junior, and graduated with them. And so she was telling me, I said, now just be cool. You know what to do. Get on the phone, get on the email, start making phone calls downtown. Well, as it happened, as the Board of Regents turned us down the first vote, there was a gentleman from Memphis on the Board of Regents came to Nashville and had a talk with those who had voted no. And of course, it became a unanimous decision, and we were given our honorary doctorate degree. And so we really enjoyed that. I work with a school in Florida. I work with two schools, South Florida University and Stetson School of Law. With their kids down there, for a couple of years now, I've been going down and teaching civil rights to their first-year law students. And I'm not even a certified teacher. But they asked me to come down. They also do a summer trip where they retrace the Freedom Ride. And I'm the one that rides with them and talk about the history, and we studied the law of that day in the 50s and 60s, and we talk about the history. And we have a chance to meet actual Freedom Riders on the way that they can touch, ask questions, and talk to about what happened to them. December 18th, well, in November, I get an email wanting to know my robe size and my height. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because they had invited me to their previous graduations. I've been to maybe 3 of their graduations that they've invited me down. One year, John Lewis, Congressman Lewis was the keynote speaker, and they called me and said, John Lewis is our keynote speaker. We need you to come down and keep him company because he doesn't know anybody. So for 3 days, I was at Stetson University with John Lewis, keeping him company. So after I get this email, and they said, we want you to come to the school, and that John Siegenthaler Sr. was going to be the keynote speaker, and we want you to come down with him. Then I get another email saying that they wanted to present me with another doctorate degree, a doctor of law, with all the privileges that a lawyer has. So if you ever need a lawyer, don't come to me. It was very important that we did a lot of singing in the movement. And singing was one of the things that kept your spirits up. When you were low, you would start singing, and other people would join in. And so we were singing all the time. Not that our spirits were low, but we wanted to make it hard on the system because they denied us with a lot of things. In Parchman, they would say, if you keep singing, we're going to take your toothbrush. Take it. We didn't care, and they did. We'll take your mattress, and they took our mattresses. We'd sing, and after they had everything, then they'd say, okay, I know what we'll do. We'll turn the heat on, and this is in the summer. We'll turn the heat on and keep it on. They did that. Then one time, they even put something in the food and turned the water off for 2 or 3 days. So you know what that is, and you got diarrhea, and you're in an 8x6 cell with your one cellmate, no water, the heat's on. So they tried everything, but they couldn't hit us. So they had to do what they could. And I came back to Nashville in 1991, and ever since then, I have been on this journey, and I intend to stay on it. Just to let you know, I mentioned Ray Arsenault, who was the author of a book called The Freedom Riders. That book has been turned into a documentary, and I have been traveling throughout the United States with that documentary, promoting the documentary. They showed it to Oprah Winfrey. She cried. She said, I want to bring all the Freedom Riders to Chicago, and we're going to do a taping on the Oprah show on April the 27th. And she's going to air that on May 4th, which is the anniversary of the Freedom Rise. She was going to tape on the 28th, but the prince is getting married on the 28th, and so she's doing a live show of the wedding. But on the 27th, we're going to have as many Freedom Riders in Chicago as possible. we had planned to go to Washington, D.C. on the 2nd and start the celebration, but since she wants us to come to Chicago, we're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Rides in Chicago, starting on the 27th of April, and we'll probably go over into the 1st or 2nd of May with the celebration. So there'll be a lot of hugging and crying and all the other things of seeing people that you know and those that you don't know, because what you do know about them is that you all were arrested and you were there for a reason. What I didn't say is that the Attorney General went back to the ICC, and by November, all the signs were down in the South. The South had to comply, so they took all the signs down. And but we're still working, and there's a lot more to do. I'm going to ask the musicians to come up because we're going to do a song. We're going to sing one of the songs that, when I say we, I don't mean the musicians. I mean you. It's an old spiritual. They would say, woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. And what we would do in the movement, we would go into a church and listen to the songs that they sing, the spirituals that they sing, and we would change the words. And that's how they got people to join the movement. We simply changed the words. And this would be, woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. So we're in the key of, it doesn't matter. Because all of us are not going to be on key anyway. We're going to do 3 verses, and then we'll get into what you came to hear, the music of the Geary Moore and the Freedom Riders. Thank you. The words. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. And I'm going to give you the words just before we go into the 2nd and 3rd verse. Well, let's give it to you now. The 2nd verse would be, ain't no harm to keep your mind stayed on freedom. And then the 3rd verse would be walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. And let me hear you. I know I got some singers over here. These are some of my choir members right in this section. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Ain't no harm to keep your mind stayed on freedom. Ain't no harm to keep your mind stayed on freedom. Ain't no harm to keep your mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Walking and talking. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.